On the day of the engagement, I discovered that my boyfriend had secretly loved my roommate for 2 years. I chose to step back and go abroad to study. 5 years later, I am already married. When I bumped into him at the supermarket, I turned sideways to avoid him and nodded politely. But he stood frozen in place. The engagement banquet was held on the 3rd floor of the Ruijing Hotel in the city center. The ballroom decorated in a champagne gold tone. I wore a custom-made Chinese wedding dress, the embroidered peonies on the hem shimmering with a delicate luster under the lights. Yan Che stood beside me, his dark gray suit making his shoulders look broad and his legs long. Waves of admiration rose from the guest seats, saying we were a match made in heaven. My fingers tightened slightly around the bouquet, a thin layer of sweat forming on my palms. For this day, I had prepared for a full 6 months. From the font on the invitations to the variety of table flowers, I oversaw every detail myself. Yan Che was busy with work and never got involved in these matters. He would only come home late after overtime, tousle my hair, and say, "Bing Lan, you've worked hard. Once we're married, I'll make it up to you." He really did work hard. His investment banking projects kept him going for days straight, and coming home at 2 in the morning was routine. I felt for him and made him different soups every day. While he drank the soup, I would sit beside him and watch his tired brows slowly relax in the steam. At those moments, I thought this was the lifetime I wanted. The master of ceremonies was warming up the crowd on stage, cracking jokes to make the relatives laugh. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Lu Yenche's phone vibrate in the inner pocket of his suit jacket. He pulled it out, glanced at it with a blank expression, then tucked it back in. I had known him for 4 years and was familiar with every micro-expression he made. That movement just now was too fast. Fast enough to seem like he was hiding something. The phone vibrated again. This time, he picked it up, turned sideways, and unlocked the screen. The sound system in the ballroom was playing a cheerful English song. The surroundings were noisy, and no one noticed the groom secretly looking at his phone. But I was standing right beside him. Through the gap between his shoulders, I clearly saw the name on the screen. Yeah. My heart skipped a beat. That was Wen Tianyue's nickname. I had shared an apartment with Wen Tianyue for 2 years. She was my roommate and also my classmate for 4 years in college. Back when we graduated and were looking for a place, she took the initiative to suggest we live together, saying splitting the rent would ease the pressure. I was easygoing and thought living with an old classmate was fine. Who would have thought that this arrangement would lead to trouble? Lu Yenche stared at the phone screen for a few seconds, quickly typed a few words with his thumb, then turned off the screen. I noticed his Adam's apple bob up and down. That was his nervous habit. Yenche. I heard my own voice sound a bit hollow. "Who's looking for you?" He turned his head, quickly putting on that familiar smile of his. "Nothing. Just work stuff. No work talk today. Let's finish the ceremony properly." He reached out to take my hand, but I instinctively pulled back. His fingers missed, paused for a moment, then he withdrew them as if nothing had happened. For the next half hour, I was in a daze. I didn't take in a single word the master of ceremonies said. My mind kept replaying that scene over and over. Yeah, I'll wait for you. What kind of work requires sending a message at 11 p.m. using a word like wait? What kind of boss-subordinate relationship would have a nickname so intimate it crossed boundaries? I quietly pulled out my phone and scrolled to Wen Tianyue's WeChat. The last message was from 3 days ago, asking when the engagement banquet would start, saying she happened to be free that day and wanted to come share in the joy. Back then, I enthusiastically said, "Come early, I'll save you a good seat." Now, looking back, that phrase, "share in the joy," felt full of irony. After several rounds of drinks, Lu Yenche was dragged off by a few college buddies to drink more. His phone was left on the dining table, screen facing up. I was sitting next to him, my fingers clenched into a fist under the tablecloth. Reason told me I shouldn't look, that was private. But another voice screamed in my head, "You're about to marry him. You have the right to know the truth." The phone lit up again, and I almost instinctively glanced over. This time, the message content was displayed directly on the lock screen. "You said you'd come clean with him tonight. I'm waiting for you. Don't forget to tell him the person you've always loved is me. In that instant, blood rushed to my head, my ears rang with a dull hum, and I stared at those words, each one stabbing into my eyes like a needle. Wen Tianyue, the person I love has always been me. I called his bluff. He said he would wait. It turns out that for the past 2 years, every time he worked late into the night, every time I simmered soup and waited for him to come home, every time he spoke gently to me on the phone and said, "Binglan, don't wait for me. Get some sleep early." There was a yaya waiting for him behind the scenes. In some corner I didn't know about. The two of them would talk about me. What tone did they use? Was it like discussing an inconvenient piece of furniture? Planning when to move me out of the way? Lu Yance was still at the table next to me, clinking glasses with someone, his laughter hearty and bright. He didn't notice anything wrong with me at all. I lowered my head and looked at the wedding dress I was wearing. The embroidery stitches were fine and delicate. I had asked someone to custom make it from Suzhou. He once said I looked the most beautiful in this dress. Now, thinking back, when he said those words, were his eyes looking at me, or were they looking through me at someone else? I stood up. My legs felt a little weak. I steadied myself by gripping the edge of the table. My aunt beside me tugged my arm. "Dinglan, where are you going? The ceremony hasn't even taken the family photo yet," I said. "I'm going to touch up my makeup." I gathered my skirt and walked toward the restroom. As I turned the corner in the hallway, I heard voices coming from the women's restroom. One of them was too familiar to me. It was Wen Tianyue. "I've already told him. Tonight. We have to get this done." Wen Tianyue's voice carried a certainty I had never heard from her before. "It's been 2 years. If I drag it out any longer, I'll be old. Anyway, all the guests are here today. I'll call him out in front of everyone. Whether he agrees or not, he has to agree." The other voice was Wen Tianyue's cousin. I had met her twice. "Sis, you're really ruthless today. But that Jiang Binglan, she's pretty pitiful. To get all the way to the engagement. Pitiful." Wen Tianyue cut her off. "In matters of the heart, it's always about who came first. Yance and I have known each other since college. If she hadn't cut in between, we would have been together long ago. So what if she took good care of him? Yance told me that being with her was just for convenience. The person in his heart has always been me." I leaned against the wall in the hallway. The light from the crystal chandelier filtered through the hollow lampshade and scattered onto my eyelids, leaving a patch of scattered gold. I thought I would cry, but I didn't. My whole body felt hollowed out, as if everything had been drained away. There was nothing left but numbness. When I returned to the banquet hall, Lu Yance was already being invited onto the stage by the host to begin the ring exchange. He stood on stage and waved at me, his smile so gentle it was flawless. "Binglan, come here." I walked toward him step by step, gathering my skirt. The high heels made a dull sound as they pressed into the red carpet. Everyone's eyes were on me. The applause was thunderous. I walked up to him and took the microphone from the host. I said, "Today's engagement ceremony is cancelled." The entire hall fell silent, as if someone had pressed the mute button. Even the background music happened to hit a rest note. The smile on Lu Yance's face froze. He leaned in close and lowered his voice. "Binglan, what did you say? Don't mess around." I looked into his eyes and said every word clearly. "Lu Yance, if you want to call Wen Tianyue's bluff, why not do it right here on stage? Save yourself the trouble of doing it behind my back. I hate trouble the most." At the table below the stage, Wen Tianyue's face turned pale in an instant. She stood up abruptly, knocking over a glass of red wine on the table. The wine spilled along the tablecloth, staining the white fabric a large, bloody red, like the way certain things shatter. Lu Yance's face cycled from red to white to green. He reached out to grab me. I sidestepped to avoid him, shoved the microphone back into the host's hands, and turned to walk off the stage. The train of my wedding dress was too long. In my hurry, I stepped on it and stumbled. But I didn't stop. Behind me was an uproar of voices, Lu Yance shouting my name. Wen Tianyue's tearful explanations. I didn't look back. When I walked out of the banquet hall's main entrance, the night wind rushed in, making me shiver. My phone vibrated frantically in my pocket. Lu Yance's name flashed across the screen. I pressed end call. then turned the phone off. The next morning, I called off the engagement, moved out, and bought a ticket for the earliest flight to New York. Everyone thought I had lost my mind. My mother cried on the phone, saying I was too impulsive, that matters of the heart shouldn't be decided so rashly. I didn't explain much to her. I only said one sentence. Mom, someone else has been living in his heart for 2 years before me. I don't even have a place to stand. If I don't leave, am I supposed to wait and be a backup plan for the rest of my life? I hung up the phone and turned it off. As the plane soared into the sky, the clouds outside the window were thick as a quilt. Sunlight leaked through the gaps in the clouds, stinging my eyes until they ached. I didn't cry. I just took a deep breath and spat out everything that had rotted inside me, along with that name. Lou Yance, 30,000 feet into the sky. The winter in New York was unbearably cold. I lived in a cramped apartment in Queens. The window wouldn't close all the way, and the night wind seeped in through the gaps, carrying the smell of rust and machine oil from the subway tracks. My landlord was an elderly Chinese woman, surnamed Song, over 70 years old, with a peculiar temper. But when she rented me this room, she charged me $200 less, only saying one thing: a young girl, out here all alone. It's not easy. Before I came, I had applied for a master's program at Columbia University. I was lucky enough to catch the last train for the spring semester. In the first week of school, I was completely overwhelmed by the intensity of the coursework. The professor's speaking speed was like a rapper's, and the reading materials he assigned piled up high enough to kill someone. I spent every day in the library until 2 in the morning. On my way back to the apartment, I had to cross 2 streets. The streetlights were dim, and occasionally there were homeless people curled up in sleeping bags in the corners. I clutched the pepper spray in my pocket and walked fast. The benefit of being so exhausted that I fell asleep as soon as my head hit the pillow was that I didn't have time to think about the bad stuff. But this phone thing was really annoying. In the middle of the night, when I dozed off at my desk and woke up again, I would habitually pull out my phone and always see messages from Lou Yenja. I had long blocked him on WeChat, but he kept switching numbers to text me. At first, it was explanations. Bing Lan, listen to me. Tianyue and I really have nothing going on. It's one-sided on his part. Then it turned into please, give me one more chance. We had 4 years of feelings, and you're just going to negate it all with one sentence. Then it became hysterical. Jiang Binglan, don't think you can just leave and it's over. I'm telling you, in this life, I deleted them before I finished reading. What was there to say? A man who was planning our wedding while telling my roommate, the one I love is you. That kind of line can't be salvaged in any story. I didn't need his explanations. I didn't need his regret. I certainly didn't need his cheap tears. I just wanted him to get out of my life. When Tianyue didn't send me any messages, he was smart enough to know that anything he said would just be pouring oil on the fire. But I heard from mutual friends that after the engagement party that day, he and Lou Yenja had a huge fight. Apparently, Lou Yenja questioned him, demanding to know why he had sent that message, saying that if he hadn't been so impatient, things wouldn't have spiraled out of control. When Tianyue cried, saying, 2 years. How long was I supposed to wait? Ha! Dogs biting dogs. I shut out that gossip behind my phone screen and went back to memorizing my vocabulary and working on my papers. Old Mrs. Song saw me coming back at dawn every day. One morning, she placed an insulated thermos of century egg and lean pork congee in front of my door, with a note underneath that said, drink it while it's hot. Don't ruin your stomach. I crouched by the door, holding that bowl of congee, and suddenly I couldn't stop crying. That was the first time I cried since coming to New York. Tears fell into the congee. After enduring the busiest midterms, I finally had a little breathing room. On the weekends, I started wandering around the school to get familiar with the environment. The Columbia campus was beautiful. The road on Morningside Heights was lined with maple trees. Spring hadn't arrived yet, and the branches were bare. But when the sun was good, the shadows on the ground looked like a sketch. It was on that road that I met Gu Huaishu. That afternoon, I came out of the library carrying a stack of books and walking back to the dorm. The wind was strong, and the top book, Econometrics, had a few pages blown open. I fumbled to press them down, but my foot slipped on a pebble, and I pitched forward. The books scattered all over the ground, and my knee hit the crack in the sidewalk. The pain made me wince. "Are you okay?" A voice came from above me. I looked up. Silhouetted against the light stood a young man, very tall, wearing a gray cashmere coat and holding a Starbucks paper bag. He crouched down to help me pick up my books. His movements unhurried. He stacked them by size and handed them back to me. "Your knee is scraped. You should go to the campus clinic and get it treated." I took the books and stammered out a thank you. He smiled, his eyes curving gently. "Judging by your look, you're a new student, right? I haven't seen you before." "Yeah, I just got here this year. Statistics department. What a coincidence. I'm a third-year PhD in computer science." He held out the Starbucks paper bag. "Here, something hot for you. You took a fall. Drinking something sweet will lift your spirits faster." I hesitated and didn't take it. He didn't push it. He just placed the bag on the pile of books next to me, waved his hand, and left. I watched his receding figure, the hem of his coat swaying in the wind. Suddenly, I felt that New York's winter wasn't so cold anymore. Later, I found out his name was Gu Huaishu. He was from Wuxi, Jiangsu. He got his bachelor's from Tsinghua University, then came to Columbia on a full scholarship for his PhD, with an advisor who was a big name in the field of computer vision. He was quite well known in the department, not just because he had published several top conference papers, though he had indeed published quite a few, but because of his popularity. Anyone who asked for his help, he would help, and then he would leave without saying a word of unnecessary nonsense. He made people feel comfortable in just the right way. The second time I saw him was also in the library. That day, I was grinding away at an algorithm problem until the middle of the night. No matter how I ran it, it threw errors, and I was so anxious I was pulling my hair out. Gu Huaishu was sitting diagonally across from me. He probably couldn't stand watching anymore, so he walked over and glanced at my screen. "That variable name on the 8th line, you wrote it with a Chinese semicolon." I looked down, and sure enough, my face burned red with embarrassment. He pulled a chair over and sat down next to me. "Let me take a look at the overall logic for you. The way you're writing this is way too inefficient." Then he spent half an hour explaining to me how to optimize the code. He explained it very patiently, going over every term, making sure I understood before moving on. When he finished packing up his things to leave, I quickly said, "Senior Gu, let me treat you to a meal." "Thank you." He glanced at his watch. "It's 1 in the morning now." "Then another day." He smiled, his eyes curving again. "Another day. You get this code running first. I'll check on it tomorrow." And just like that, something inexplicably took root. At first, it was purely academic interaction. I asked him questions. He helped me revise my thesis. Gradually, it turned into going to the cafeteria together for meals. And occasionally on weekends, we'd head to Flushing for some Chinese food to satisfy our cravings. He didn't talk much, but every word he said hit the mark. Unlike some people who chat like they need to recount their entire family tree for 17 generations, being with him was quiet, but that quietness wasn't awkward. It was like two tributaries flowing into the same body of water, each flowing on its own, yet heading in the same direction. Once, after a meal, we were walking back and passed by the Hudson River. The wind was strong, and my scarf was flying wildly. He reached out and helped straighten the tassels on my scarf, his fingers brushing against my neck. They were warm. My entire back instantly tensed up. He must have felt my stiffness, because he pulled his hand back and took half a step away. "It's cold. Let's walk faster." For several days after that, he didn't ask me to eat. When I ran into him at the library, he nodded politely, then went around to the other side to work. My heart felt hollow, and I told myself I was being overly sentimental. He was just helping you out a few times, being considerate to a junior. What are you overthinking for? Then, one night, I found him standing at the entrance of my apartment building, holding an insulated bag in his hand. When he saw me, he looked relieved and walked over. "Grandma Song said you haven't been eating properly these past few days. She told me to bring you some soup." He shoved the insulated bag into my hands. Mountain yam and pork ribs. My mom's recipe. Drink it while it's hot. I held the warm bag and looked up at him. The street lamp cast a soft shadow across his face. His eyelashes were long, spreading a small patch of darkness under his eyelids. At that moment, my heartbeat was so loud it felt like a drum. I wondered if he could hear it. Gu Huaishu. I called him by his full name. Why are you so good to me? He was silent for a few seconds, then shifted his gaze away from my face, looking toward a distant street lamp. I'm afraid you can't handle it alone. My tears surged up without warning. In these few months in New York, I had been gritting my teeth and swallowing everything. When I couldn't understand the lectures, I previewed them 3 times in advance. When my thesis couldn't be revised well, I stayed up all night rewriting it. Everyone praised me for being strong, but only he saw that I was actually on the verge of shattering. When he saw me crying, he panicked a little. His hand lifted, as if to wipe away my tears, but stopped mid-air. Don't cry. Did I say something wrong? I shook my head, burying my face in the insulated bag, sniffling. No, you're right. I really can't handle it. He let out a sigh and gently patted my shoulder. If you can't handle it, lean on me for a while. I don't have much else, but my shoulders are pretty sturdy. I stood under the street lamp for a long time. My tears soaked a patch of his cashmere coat sleeve. He didn't rush me. He just stood there quietly, occasionally reaching up to tuck a strand of my windblown hair behind my ear. At that moment, I thought, maybe wounds don't bleed forever. Maybe one day, they'll scab over, heal, and leave a faint scar on the skin, slowly fading until it's invisible. Being with Gu Huaishu happened near the end of that winter. Strangely enough, it wasn't a case of one chasing the other. There was no formal confession. It was just one night in the library. He finished writing his paper and came over to sit next to me. Suddenly, he placed his hand over mine on the mouse. Bing ran. Let me be your boyfriend. The cursor on my screen jumped all over the place. My heart felt like it was about to leap out of my throat. I turned my head to look at him. He still had that gentle expression, but the tips of his ears were clearly red. You're serious. He stared into my eyes. I've wanted to say it since last month. I was afraid you'd think I was taking advantage of you, but after thinking it over, I figured it wasn't worth waiting. What if someone else snatches you away? I burst out laughing. He has been at Columbia for 3 years. Rumors say the number of girls chasing him could line up from the computer science department all the way to the statistics department. And yet, he was worried about someone stealing me away. But after saying that one line, he didn't push further. He just lifted his hand from mine, looked at me quietly, and waited for my answer. I took a deep breath. Okay. His eyes lit up. He reached out and ruffled my hair. Not a single cheesy word passed his lips. Instead, he stood up, poured me a glass of hot water, and placed it by my hand. Let's keep working on the homework. I'll walk you back when you're done. Dating Gu Huaishu was, from start to finish, so steady it felt unreal. He wasn't one for sweet talk, but he remembered the days of my period and would buy brown sugar ginger tea in advance, setting it on my desk. When I stayed up late writing my thesis, he'd bring me a late-night snack, cheese fries from the food truck behind the school that stayed open until dawn. When I was anxious, he'd just sit beside me without saying a word. His mere presence was enough to make me feel at ease. Little by little, I gathered back the energy I had once drained away on Lu Yenjia. Lu Yenjia was romantic in his own way. He'd book the most expensive restaurant in town for anniversaries, gift limited edition watches and bags, and post flashy couple photos on his social media with captions like, "Having you in this life is enough." But when I was sick, all he'd do was send a single message, "Drink more hot water," and then disappear for the entire day. When I said I wanted to chat, he'd snap, "I've had a long day. Can you just give me some peace?" And when Tianyue texted him saying she was feeling down, he'd drop his chopsticks immediately and rush off to keep her company. Back then, I thought love was supposed to be a bittersweet mix. Who doesn't have their share of grievances? Gu Huaishu showed me that a good relationship could be effortless. He never made me guess what he was thinking. If something came up, he'd say it, and once it was said, it was solved. The love he gave was laid out in the open sunlight, no shadows. No hidden corners festering with dirt. After I got together with him, the smiles on my face grew more and more frequent. Even my mom noticed during our video calls. "You've been looking better lately. Did something good happen?" I didn't tell her. It wasn't that I wanted to hide Gu Huaishu's existence. It was just that the timing didn't feel right yet. I wanted to wait until I had truly found my footing. Until I had the capacity to nurture a relationship properly. Before introducing him to my mom. In my second year of my master's, I worked on a project with my advisor related to financial big data. Luck was on my side, and our research yielded a decent conference paper. Before graduation, I received an internship offer from a quantitative fund company. Gu Huaishu was busy preparing for his own thesis defense at the time, running around like a headless chicken, but he still made time to help me with mock interviews. He drilled me on my English self-introduction over and over until I could recite it even with my eyes closed. On my first day at work, I put on a new black suit. Gu Huaishu stood at the entrance of the apartment to see me off, straightened my collar, and then suddenly leaned in to plant a kiss on my forehead. "Go on. My girlfriend's the best." I walked down the streets of Manhattan in my high heels, surrounded by the hurried crowd and the glass facades of skyscrapers. Sunlight sliced through the gaps between buildings, spilling a golden carpet across the ground. In that moment, I felt a wave of déjà vu. 3 years ago, I had stood in the arrival hall of JFK Airport, dragging 2 large suitcases, with only $2,000 in my pocket and a bank account balance under 4 digits. My heart and mind were filled with unspeakable, shattered grievances. And now, here I was, with a respectable job, a boyfriend who gave me peace of mind, and a small but cozy apartment. It had taken me 3 years to piece together the broken version of myself, piece by piece, and I had rebuilt it stronger than before. After my internship ended, I was converted to a full-time employee. With my first month's salary, I bought a massage chair for old Mrs. Song and sent a sum of money to my mom. On the other end of the phone, my mom was silent for a long time. Then she said, "Bing Lan, I tried to stop you from going abroad before because I was afraid you'd suffer out there. Now that I see you're doing so well, I can rest easy." My nose tingled, but I held back the tears. "Mom, I've got a boyfriend. I'll bring him to meet you next time I come home." Gu Huaishu, who was sitting on the couch nearby, heard me and gave me a thumbs up, his eyes crinkling into crescents. Life moved forward steadily like this. Gu Huaishu and I moved into a slightly bigger apartment in Midtown, with a window that offered a sliver of a view of the Hudson River. Every morning before he left for the lab, he would make me breakfast. I would eat and then head to the office. In the evenings, whoever got home first would cook dinner. On weekends, we'd occasionally have dinner with friends, or just curl up on the couch watching a movie until we fell asleep. The days were plain, but that plainness was solid. Rooted, like a tree that had finally found the right soil to grow in. The name Wen Tianle had faded from my life long ago, and I slowly lost touch with my old friends. It wasn't that I was actively avoiding them, but as a person moves forward on their path, some people naturally fall behind. Occasionally, someone with little tact would come running to me with gossip. They said that Wen Tianyue and Lu Yanchen never ended up together after all. They tangled with each other for over half a year. And in the end, it turned into a very unpleasant mess. Lu Yanchen's mother, Zhao Wanqing, had originally liked Wen Tianle quite a bit, but after learning about all this, she was furious. She said her son had found a woman with no sense of boundaries, who had ruined a perfectly good marriage arrangement. I just smiled after hearing it and didn't say a word in response. That evening, I leaned against Gu Huaishu's shoulder while he was reading a research paper on his tablet. Suddenly, I asked him, "Huaisu, do you mind the things from my past?" He put down the tablet and looked at me seriously. "Your past is the process that made you the person you are today. I like the person you are now. Why would you fight with the process?" I buried my face into the hollow of his neck and said, in a muffled voice, "Thank you." He patted my back gently. "What are you thanking me for?" "I should be thanking you for falling so hard back then and still being able to get back up. If you hadn't gotten up, where would I have found such a good girlfriend?" I laughed and punched him lightly on the chest, my heart feeling as warm as if I had just drunk a cup of hot cocoa. The summer Gu Huaixiu graduated. We went back to China for a visit. He had received an offer from a tech company in the Bay Area with a very high salary, but he was hesitant about whether to go. He said it was too far from me. At that time, I was working in Manhattan, and I was getting more and more comfortable with my job. Project after project came my way. My boss told me there was a chance for a promotion at the end of the year. Long-distance separation was a big problem. We talked about it seriously several times, but in the end, neither of us could convince the other. But fate has a way of arranging things sometimes. That autumn, there was an internal restructuring at my company. A new department related to AI algorithms was established. Because of my interdisciplinary background from my master's degree, I was transferred there to do product-side data analysis. It happened to overlap with Gu Huaixiu's field. He later accepted an offer from a major company that had a branch in New York, so he split his time between the two places. This way, neither of us had to completely give up on our careers. On my first day at the new job, I joked, "Dr. Gu, from now on, I'm your client." He smiled and replied, "Then I'd better take good care of my client, otherwise I won't have dinner to go home to." Day by day, our life together grew more and more filled with the warmth of daily living. We adopted an orange cat and named it Zhao Kai. Every time Gu Huaixiu scooped its litter box, he would frown with a look of disgust. But when the cat jumped onto the bed in the middle of the night and stepped on his face, he never got annoyed. He would just turn over, pull the cat into his arms, and continue sleeping. Watching him, I felt that this man had something deeply reassuring about him, something that settled into your very bones. That Christmas, Gu Huaixiu took me ice skating at Central Park. I was clumsy on the ice and fell down several times. He held my hand and guided me slowly. The lights from the rink reflected in his eyes, scattered like tiny fragments of stars. When we came out after skating, it had started to snow lightly. Suddenly, he pulled a small velvet box from his coat pocket and knelt down on one knee in the snow. People around us started cheering. I was completely stunned. He said, "Binglan, marry me. From now on, whenever you fall, I'll be there to help you up. No matter how hard the road gets, I'll be right beside you." I crouched down to be level with him and reached out to touch his face. The tips of my fingers were wet with melted snowflakes, cool to the touch. "Gu Huaixiu, you've made me ruin my makeup from crying." He laughed as he slipped the ring onto my ring finger. It fit perfectly. I found out later that he had measured my finger while I was asleep, using a thin thread wrapped around it, and then compared it bit by bit with a ruler. The wedding was very simple. We had a few close friends as witnesses at New York City Hall. Afterwards, we went back to China and held 2 small family banquets. When my mother met Gu Huaixiu, she was overjoyed. She held his hand and asked him all sorts of questions. Finally, she quietly told me, "This one is good. This one has light in his eyes. When he looks at you, his gaze is solid." I knew what she meant. Back when Lu Yanchen came to our house for dinner, my mother talked with him for 2 hours. Afterwards, she told me, "This boy says nice things, but I always felt his heart wasn't really set on you." At the time, I was unhappy and thought my mother was too picky about people. Looking back now, I realize that old ginger is spicier. Life after marriage is no different from life before marriage. It's just that we now have an extra certificate, and an extra measure of peace of mind. I was busy with my career, and Gu Huaixiu was busy with his, but we still stole moments to take care of our little home. Zhao Kai had grown from a tiny kitten no bigger than a palm into a fat orange cat weighing over 10 pounds. Every day, he would lie on the windowsill, basking in the sun, occasionally flicking his tail across our faces with a touch of aloofness. Time passed both quickly and slowly. Work challenges came one after another, but Gu Huaixiu always managed to hand me a cup of coffee just when I was at my wit's end. He would sit down and listen to me vent, then help me sort through my thoughts after I finished. He never gave me direct answers, saying, "I believe you can figure it out yourself," but he would stay by my side until I solved the problem. One late night, I had just finished a quarterly review for a project, exhausted to the point where I couldn't straighten my back. Gu Huaishu was coding in the study. I tiptoed over and hugged him from behind. His typing fingers paused for a moment. Then he reached back and stroked my hair. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I said. "I just feel like life is too good right now. So good it feels unreal." He closed his laptop screen, turned around, and pulled me onto his lap, pressing his forehead against mine. "Really? It'll be this good from now on too, I promise." Moonlight streamed through the gaps in the blinds, cutting silver lines across the floor. Occasionally, the sound of a car passing by drifted in, carried away by the wind through the leaves. Sitting in his arms, I caught the faint scent of laundry detergent on him, and the lingering unease in my heart finally fell completely still. That night, I had a dream. I was walking down a very long corridor with many doors on both sides. I pushed open the first one and saw Lu Yance smiling at me at his engagement party, but by his hand lay another phone, its screen glowing with Wen Tianle's name. I closed the door and kept walking. The second door opened to Wen Tianyue, sitting on the sofa from when Lu Yance and I had lived together, gleefully rummaging through my wardrobe. I closed that door too. The third door revealed the airport, where I was pulling my suitcase without looking back. Behind me, Lu Yance was calling my name. I stopped and glanced back, then pushed open the next door. Beyond it was a sunlit lawn. Gu Huaishu was crouched on the ground playing with Xiao Kai, the fat orange cat lazily rolling over to show his belly. He looked up, saw me, waved, and said with a smile, "Come here, this cat ate too much again." I smiled and walked toward him, then woke up. When I woke, the sky was just beginning to lighten. Gu Huaishu was still asleep, his arm draped over my waist, his breathing steady. I gently moved his arm aside, got up, and went to the kitchen to pour a glass of water. Standing by the window, I looked out. Manhattan's skyline was faintly visible through the morning mist, and the first horn of a tugboat on the Hudson River echoed. 5 years. It had been exactly 5 years since that engagement party that had turned my world upside down. After finishing the water, I returned to bed. Gu Huaishu, half asleep, rolled over and pulled me into his arms, mumbling vaguely, "Sleep a little more." I closed my eyes, and the fragments of the past receded like the ebbing tide, slowly, leaving behind a flat, clean beach. I came back to China because my mother wasn't feeling well. It wasn't anything serious, just high blood pressure and old knee issues that flared up when the seasons changed. She didn't tell me, but our neighbor Aunt Zhang secretly called, saying, "Your mom's been limping lately. Don't take it lightly." I requested annual leave from work that same day, and Gu Huaishu adjusted his work schedule too. We booked the earliest flight back. The day we landed was deep autumn. Outside the airport, ginkgo leaves carpeted the ground. Their golden hue spread across the gray asphalt, rustling in the wind. My mother came to pick us up, wearing a dark red thin down jacket, standing at the arrival's gate, craning her neck. When I saw her from a distance, my nose suddenly stung with emotion. She had aged since I left, with much more gray in her hair and deeper creases on her face. But her eyes were still bright, curving into crescent moons when she saw me. "Mom, you've lost weight," I said, hugging her, catching the familiar scent of laundry powder. "What weight loss? You're the one who's lost weight. Not used to the food abroad, huh?" Gu Huaishu came up behind me carrying 2 large suitcases, smiling as he called out, "Mom." My mother quickly patted my back, let go, and went to take the suitcases from him. "Xiao Gu, you didn't tell me you were coming back." "I haven't prepared anything." "No need to prepare, Mom," Gu Huaishu said, shifting the suitcases to his other hand. "We're just here to spend some time with you. Don't tire yourself out." My mother pretended to scold us, but the smile on her face couldn't be hidden. On the way home, he sat in the back seat, reaching out to touch my hair one moment and patting Gu Huaishu's shoulder the next, chattering on and on about which neighbor had moved away, whose son had gotten married. His words coming out so fast it was as if he was afraid he wouldn't have time to finish. Once we got him settled at home, I accompanied my mom to the hospital for a full checkup. The doctor said it wasn't a big problem. Just take the medicine on time and keep it under control. Only then did I feel mostly relieved. and I started bustling around helping him tidy up the house, reorganizing the seasonal clothes. Gu Huaisu didn't slack off either. He took apart the old washing machine at my place and cleaned it thoroughly, then climbed up to the balcony and sealed the drafty window gaps with tape. Behind his back, my mom praised him to me, saying, "Young Gu is truly reliable. Nothing like that one who came to our house empty-handed before and even complained that our tea wasn't good enough." I laughed and changed the subject, not wanting her to bring up the past again. On the 10th day after his return, we were running low on some daily necessities at home. My mom asked me to go to the newly opened large supermarket nearby, saying it had everything at fair prices and was only a 15-minute walk away. I agreed, grabbed a canvas bag, and headed out. It was a deep autumn afternoon. The sunlight spread thinly across the ground, and the wind carried the lingering scent of osmanthus flowers, faint and drifting. I had walked this road countless times as a child. The bakery on the corner had changed its sign, but the smell of baked bread was still the same. The sycamore trees on both sides of the street were thicker than I remembered, their canopies covering most of the sky, half of the leaves yellow and half still green, rustling down as the wind blew. I stepped on the carpet of fallen leaves and walked forward, my mind empty, simply enjoying this steady, familiar atmosphere. The supermarket was huge, with shelves neatly arranged, the warm yellow light shining on the goods, exuding a sense of abundant life. In the daily necessities section, I picked up some laundry detergent and paper towels, then went to the fresh produce area and grabbed a few boxes of strawberries that my mom loved. Before I knew it, my shopping cart was full. As I headed toward the checkout, passing through the seasonal section, I caught a glimpse of two people standing by the shelves out of the corner of my eye. I didn't pay attention and kept pushing my cart, but after taking a couple of steps, I paused. That man's figure, that silhouette, that habitual slight stoop in his posture, my steps slowed, and my heart suddenly clenched. It was Liu Yanche. I hadn't seen him in 5 years. He was thinner than before, his profile sharper, his hair cut very short, wearing a dark blue jacket. Looking down at his phone, next to him stood a woman, her back to me, wearing a pale pink knit sweater, her hair in big waves, reaching for a bag of potato chips on the top shelf. It was Wen Tianyu. The way they stood together looked so natural. Wen Tianyu couldn't reach the chips, so Liu Yanche put down his phone and helped her grab them, casually tossing them into the cart. Wen Tianyu turned around and said something to him, and Liu Yanche smiled, but there was no warmth in that smile, just a slight curl of his lips before it faded. 5 years ago, at the engagement banquet, those scenes flashed through my mind like a rewind. The name, Yu, on his phone screen, the words he spoke while hiding in the restroom, his frozen face on stage, the red wine he knocked over below. Those details I thought I had long forgotten all came rushing back, surging like a tide before my eyes, leaving me momentarily dizzy. But I quickly steadied myself. I looked down at myself, a black cashmere coat, shoulder-length hair, the plain wedding ring on my ring finger glowing softly under the light. The shopping cart held strawberries and daily necessities for my mom, and the canvas bag hung loosely from the handle. I was here to shop, not to stage some scene of a reunion with an old flame. I took a deep breath, gently turned the cart to the side, and sidestepped out of their line of sight. The movement was small, almost natural, as if I just wanted to check out some cookies on the other side. As I pushed the cart forward, I could feel my heartbeat, steady and strong. I had thought I would panic, tremble, or feel cold hands and feet like 5 years ago, but I didn't. I even had the composure to glance at my reflection in the mirror wall as I passed, calm, relaxed, with even a slight upward curve at the corners of my mouth. I circled around 2 rows of shelves, planning to take another aisle to the checkout. Just as I turned the corner, a voice came from behind me, tinged with hesitation and uncertainty. Bing Lan. I stopped. That voice was too familiar, so familiar that I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. 5 years later, I could still recognize his tone in an instant, but unlike before, that voice could no longer make my heart race. It was like a bird flying past the car window, fluttering its wings once and then gone, leaving no trace behind. I turned around, Lu Yanche stood 3 paces away, his phone still clutched in his hand, his entire body frozen in place as if rooted to the spot. He stared at me, a storm of complex emotions churning in his eyes: surprise, disbelief, and then a fleeting hint of something indescribable. I met his gaze and gave a polite nod, a very light one, like acknowledging a familiar neighbor, courteous, distant, devoid of any emotional warmth. Then I gripped the shopping cart handle again, sidestepped to clear the aisle, and pushed the cart past him. Behind me, footsteps followed for 2 steps, then stopped. I heard Wen Tianle's voice calling from afar, "Yanche, what are you doing?" I didn't turn around, didn't quicken my pace, didn't do anything unnecessary. I pushed my fully loaded cart toward the checkout, and as I passed the fruit section, I casually grabbed a box of blueberries and tossed it in. Sunlight streamed in through the supermarket's floor-to-ceiling windows, spilling across the tiles in a bright, golden patch. I queued up to pay, and my phone buzzed with a message from Gu Huaishu. "What do you want for dinner?" "Mom says she'll make braised pork ribs." I smiled and typed back a single word, "Okay." Someone behind me called my name, muffled by the supermarket's noisy background, barely audible across several rows of shelves. Without looking back, I paid, picked up 2 heavy bags, and walked out. The wind hit me outside, and ginkgo leaves scattered all over me. On my way home, I called Gu Huaishu. He answered and caught a hint of something off in my voice. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I said. "I bought a lot of stuff. Come pick me up. I'm almost there. Don't move." I hung up and stood by the roadside, waiting. The sun slanted warmly across my face. My phone buzzed again in my pocket, a text from an unknown number. Just 3 words. Jiang Binglan. I knew who it was, but I turned off the screen and shoved the phone back into my coat pocket. Gu Huaishu's car appeared at the intersection. He rolled down the window, stuck his head out, and waved. I hurried over with my bags, and he got out to help me load them, casually brushing a ginkgo leaf off my shoulder. "Why so much stuff? You just bought everything in sight." I put the bags in the trunk and turned to face him. The sunset gilded his silhouette, so beautiful it made my heart soften. "What's wrong?" he asked again, probably because I hadn't hidden my expression well. I stood on my tiptoes and kissed him. "Nothing. I just think." I paused, swallowing the rest of the sentence, and changed it to, "I think the ginkgo leaves are especially beautiful today." He chuckled, didn't press further, opened the passenger door, and let me in. As the car started, I glanced in the rearview mirror at the road behind us, empty streets, parasol trees swaying in the wind. Not a single person in sight. I looked away, leaned back in my seat, pulled out my phone, clicked on that unknown number, and decisively blocked it. "Huaishu, what's for dinner?" "Braised pork ribs. Mom said so." "Yeah. Let's go home." The car turned a corner, driving into the golden light of early evening. I cracked the window open a sliver, and the autumn wind rushed in, cool and refreshing, blowing away the last faint trace of something that belonged to the past. That evening after dinner, while I was helping Mom clean up the dishes, my phone rang again. I glanced at it, same unknown number, but this time with a different ending digit. "Block 1, and another pops up. I just silenced it and set the phone face down on the counter. Mom was washing dishes beside me without turning around. "Your phone keeps buzzing. Nuisance calls." "I'm ignoring them," I said, but she knew me too well. After a moment of silence, she turned off the faucet and looked at me. "Binglan, did you run into someone outside?" My hands paused mid-motion. A mother knows her daughter, of course. I couldn't hide anything from her. I dried my hands and leaned against the counter. "I saw Lu Yanche at the supermarket today." Mom nearly dropped the bowl in her hands. She set it down, grabbed a paper towel to dry her hands, her expression shifting several times before she finally sighed. "Did he talk to you?" I shook my head. I avoided him, just nodded and left. Mom stared at me for a long moment, her eyes filled with a mix of concern, worry, and something else. She reached out and touched my hair, her voice soft and slow. "Binglan, Mom knows you've got a good head on your shoulders, but you have to promise me, no matter what he comes back for, don't soften up. Your life is good now." There's no need to get tangled up with him again. I laughed. Mom, you're overthinking it. Why would I soften up? I can barely even remember what he looks like. Good, she said, picking up the bowl to rinse it. And that classmate of yours, what was his name? I heard he didn't end up with him either. After you left, he made a big scene, looking for you everywhere. He even went to your dad's workplace once. And your dad kicked him out. I froze. He went to see my dad. After you left, about a month into it. I guess, he showed up at your dad's workplace and blocked the entrance. He said your phone was off, that you'd blocked him on WeChat. And he wanted to apologize to you in person. Your dad said, "What's there to apologize for? You drove my daughter away. And now you want to say sorry. It's too late." After that, he kept calling the house every few days. Your dad answered a few times, then stopped picking up. I leaned against the kitchen counter, feeling nothing much inside. I went to find your dad. If this had been 5 years ago, Lu Yenjia would never have done something like this. That man valued his pride above all else. Even when we argued, he would only send texts, never call. Terrified someone might overhear and think he'd lost face. For him to swallow his pride and wait outside your dad's workplace, it showed how desperate he was back then. But what good did desperation do? A person's most pathetic moment is often when they finally realize what they've lost. And the cruel irony is that the thing he lost had already vanished the moment he decided to hide the truth from me and love someone else. Gu Huaishu came out of the shower, his hair still damp and falling across his forehead. He saw my mom and me whispering in the kitchen. He didn't come over. Instead, he went to the balcony himself, took down the laundry, and quietly folded it. My mom watched him, so gentle and considerate, and couldn't help but laugh. She gave me a little push. "All right. Stop hovering here. Go keep Xiao Gu company. I'll wash the dishes." I walked out of the kitchen. Gu Huaishu was on the sofa folding clothes. Zhao Kai, the cat we'd brought back with us, was curled up on his lap, dozing off. I sat down beside him and leaned my head against his shoulder. "Who did you run into at the supermarket today?" he asked suddenly, his tone casual, like he was asking what we'd have for dinner. I didn't hide it from him. Lu Yenjia. And Wen Tianyue. His hand paused for a moment. Then he went back to folding. "Did you talk?" Just nodded. I didn't stop. He folded the last t-shirt, set it aside, and reached over to put an arm around my shoulder. "You did the right thing. With some people, it's best to act like you didn't see them." I looked up at him. His expression was calm, with no trace of jealousy or unease in his eyes. In all the time I'd been with Gu Huaishu, he never pried into my past, never used it against me in an argument. He had that confidence, and that magnanimity. He knew that since I chose him, I was certain about him. Sometimes I think a good partner makes the whole world feel soft and gentle. It lets you set down those heavy burdens one by one, without worrying if anyone will catch them, because he's right there, steady and solid. The next morning, I went to the market to buy groceries for my mom. On my way back, I ran into Zhao Wanqing at the entrance of the neighborhood. Zhao Wanqing was Lu Yenjia's mother. During the 4 years I was with him, I visited her home for every holiday. She was never overly warm with me, but never cold either. She kept a polite, respectful distance. After the engagement party incident, I deleted him from WeChat and hadn't seen him since. She was standing in front of the breakfast shop at the neighborhood entrance, wearing a dark purple padded jacket, her hair pinned up perfectly neat and tidy. She still had that clean, sharp look about her, but she had lost a lot of weight. Her cheekbones were more prominent now. She seemed to be waiting for someone, holding 2 plastic bags with youtiao and soy milk inside. I hesitated for a moment, thinking about taking another path. But it was too late. She saw me. Zhao Wanqing's expression shifted several times, from surprise to hesitation. And finally she squeezed out an awkward smile. She took a step forward, opened her mouth, then closed it again. I stopped and greeted her politely. "Hello, Aunt Zhao." She quickly responded, shifting the plastic bags to her other hand. "Bing Lan. You're back in the country. Just visiting my mom. Good, good. You should." She nodded, her eyes scanning my face several times before finally settling on the ring on my ring finger. Her gaze dimmed. "You're married. Is he good to you?" she asked, then immediately felt the question was too forward. So she quickly added, "I mean, are you doing well?" "I'm doing great. Thank you, Auntie." We stood there in front of the breakfast shop, surrounded by the noisy bustle of a morning market. People were haggling, electric scooters honking and squeezing through the crowd. The smell of frying youtiao mixed with the steam from soy milk, tangling together in the air. But in the few steps of distance between Zhao Wanqing and me, it felt as cold as if a whole winter had settled in. She was silent for a while, then let out a sudden sigh. "Binglan, about what happened back then, Yanjia was really sorry for you. I only found out later about his affair with your roommate. I was so angry at the time. But, let's not talk about it." She looked up at me, her eyes a little red. "He's been regretting it ever since. From the day you left. He regretted it. He looked for you for a long time, tried every way he could. But some things, once you do them wrong, they're wrong. Regret doesn't help." I understood. I didn't know what else to say, so I just nodded. "Auntie, it's all in the past. I don't blame him anymore." "Really?" Zhao Wanqing froze for a moment, as if she hadn't expected me to say I didn't blame him. Her lips moved, like she wanted to say something more, but in the end, she just forced a smile. "You're a good kid." Yanjia didn't have the luck. She stood there a little longer, then said, "Well, you go ahead. I'll head back." "Well, Auntie, take care." She turned and walked away, her steps a little slower than before, her back no longer as straight as it used to be. I stood there in place, watching her silhouette disappear around the street corner. I felt some emotion in my heart, but nothing heavy. Time really is a strange thing. It can turn those people and events that once made you wish you were dead into nothing more than a distant tree by the roadside. You glance at it as you pass by, and then you keep walking your own path. I carried my groceries home. When I walked in, Gu Huaishu was hanging laundry on the balcony. He turned his head and gave me a smile. I put the vegetables in the kitchen, washed my hands, and went over to help him pass the clothespins. The sky outside the window was a clean, clear blue, without a single cloud. A few sparrows landed on the drainpipe of the building across the way, chirped noisily for a while, then flew off again. My mom called out from the living room, "Let's make dumplings for lunch. Xiao Gu loves the chive and egg filling." I answered her with a, "Sure," and the corners of my eyes curved up. 3 days later came the class reunion. I didn't really want to go at first. It was organized by our college class monitor, Zhao Mingyuan. He said a few old classmates from his department hadn't been around for a while, and since I was back in the country just in time, I absolutely had to come out for a meal. I hesitated in the group chat for a long time. In the end, it was Gu Huaishu who said, "Go ahead. It's nice to catch up with old classmates. I'll pick you up in the evening." I privately messaged Zhao Mingyuan and asked, "Is Wen Tianle going?" He replied with a helpless emoji and said, "I was just about to tell you. He heard you were coming and said he wants to come too. If you don't want to see him, I'll just say you can't make it." I thought about it for a moment and replied, "It's fine. Let him come. It's been so many years now." The truth is, I knew in my heart that Wen Tianle wasn't coming for the old classmates. He was coming for me. After that whole mess 5 years ago, he's probably been holding a grudge. He won Lu Yanjia's person, but I left clean and completely, without ever arguing with him a single time. An opponent you never even fought with, it's like punching a ball of cotton. All his triumph landed on nothing. 5 years later, he probably wants to see what this loser looks like now. The dinner was held at a Cantonese restaurant south of the city. The private room was quite large, and the round table seated about a dozen people, all old classmates from college who had decent relationships back then. When I pushed the door open, most of them had already arrived. Someone recognized me and stood up, calling out, "Yo, Jiang Binglan, you're finally back." I smiled and greeted them, exchanging pleasantries one by one. Someone asked me how New York was. Someone else asked what kind of work I was doing now. I tossed out the prepared answers one by one, and the atmosphere was lively. Not long after I sat down, when Tianle arrived, He was wearing a caramel-colored trench coat, his hair dyed a light brown, with delicate makeup and even done nails. When he pushed the door open, a standard social smile was plastered on his face. His gaze swept across the private room, landed on me, and paused for half a second before returning to normal. Bing Lan, long time no see. He walked over and sat down in the empty seat next to me, his tone warm and familiar, as if nothing had ever happened. Long time no see. I took a sip of tea and responded flatly. At the dinner table, the conversation drifted through old stories: who went abroad, who got promoted, who got divorced. The topics jumped from one to another. Wen Tianle sat beside me, occasionally chiming in. Every time he spoke, his gaze would unconsciously drift over to me, as if waiting for some reaction. But I gave him nothing. He talked about his stuff, and I listened to mine. Occasionally, I chatted with the people next to me about work, my expression as relaxed as if he were just an ordinary old classmate. Halfway through the meal, when Tianle went to the restroom, I also got up at the same time to refill my tea. I ran into him in the hallway. He was standing in front of the sink, touching up his lipstick. When he saw me in the mirror, he twisted the lipstick cap shut and turned around. Bing Lan. He leaned against the sink, crossing his arms. You're doing pretty well. Huh, not bad, I said, pouring a cup of tea. What about you? Me. He let out a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. Just so. Yanche, you've seen him. We ran into each other at the supermarket. He's been talking about you ever since he got back. The way he said it carried a hint of something, like a probe or a jab. He said you've changed a lot over the years. More relaxed than before. People always change. I walked back with my teacup, pausing for a step as I passed him. Tianle, you don't need to test me. I don't care about what's going on between you two, and I'm not interested. I came here today just to have a meal and see some old classmates. Nothing else. The smile on his face finally faltered. The corners of his mouth dropped slightly. The way you say that makes it sound like I'm the one causing trouble. That's not what I meant. I looked at him, my tone even. I just want to put your mind at ease. I won't compete with you for anything. I wouldn't have 5 years ago. And I definitely won't now. I pushed open the door to the private room and walked back in. Behind me, there were no footsteps following. After the dinner party concluded, when Tianle returned to his seat, his words were noticeably fewer, and his chopsticks occasionally poked at the dishes on the plate before stopping altogether. Someone asked if he was feeling unwell, and he forced a faint smile, shaking his head, saying it was nothing. As the party dispersed, I stood at the entrance waiting for Gu Huaishu to pick me up. People trickled out in 2s and 3s. Some hailed cabs, others called for designated drivers. The lively bustle faded, and most had gone. Zhao Mingyuan was the last to come out. He patted my shoulder and said, Bing Lan, you looked in great form today. I've always thought you handled that whole situation back then very cleanly. It's all in the past now. I replied, it's in the past. But that doesn't mean it never happened. He shook his head and said, that roommate of yours. Forget it. I won't say more. Anyway, you're living better than anyone else now. That's the best form of payback. Gu Huaishu's car arrived, parked across the street. He lowered the window and waved at me. I smiled, said goodbye to Zhao Mingyuan, and quickly crossed the road. As I got into the car, I caught a glimpse of Wen Tianyue walking out of the restaurant entrance, standing there staring in my direction. She was alone, without Lu Yance, a solitary figure standing beneath the street lamp. The wind tousled her wavy hair, making it a bit messy. She watched as I chatted and laughed with Gu Huaishu inside the car, watched as he reached over to fasten my seatbelt, watched as the car started and drove away. In the rearview mirror, her figure grew smaller and smaller, eventually shrinking into a blurry merging into the night. When we got home, my mom had already gone to sleep. Zhao Kai was lying on the shoe cabinet in the entryway and meowed at me. Gu Huaishu went to the kitchen to pour some water. I followed behind him, wrapped my arms around his waist from behind, and asked, how was your day today? He turned around, stroked my hair, and said, good. I said what needed to be said, and didn't say a single word I shouldn't have. I pressed my cheek against his chest and said, Huaishu, Thank you. He asked. Thank me for what? I replied. Thank you for giving me the confidence to sit there without being afraid of anything. He lowered his head and kissed the top of my head. Silly girl. You had that confidence yourself. I was just standing nearby, handing you a glass of water. I laughed, holding on to him without letting go. Outside the window, the night was gentle. Thousands of lights twinkled like stars, each one hiding a story behind it. And my story, having come this far, had finally turned to its warmest chapter. The day after the class reunion, I accompanied my mom for a walk in the park. The late autumn sun felt warm on our skin. My mom walked beside me, her cane tapping against the stone path with a crisp sound. She suddenly asked, "At dinner yesterday, that when Tianyu showed up, did she give you a hard time?" I smiled and said, "Mom, what trouble could she cause me? I'm doing better than her now, better job, better husband. What could she possibly do to me?" My mom glanced at me and chuckled too. All right. My girl's got a sharp tongue now. We strolled slowly along the lakeside. The wind created tiny golden ripples on the water, and a few ducks swam back and forth. After walking most of the way around the lake, my mom suddenly stopped and pointed at a figure on the opposite shore. "Look, who is that?" I followed her gaze. On a bench across the lake sat a person with their head lowered, wearing a gray sweater. The silhouette looked somewhat dejected, and I didn't recognize them. My mom said, "That's Lu Yance. I saw him earlier. He didn't come over. He just sat there." My steps paused for a moment. Then I continued walking. "Ignore him. Let's just go our way." But my mom grabbed my arm. "Binglan, go over there and make things clear. Some people, if you don't tell them face to face, they'll always think there's still hope. You don't want to be on edge every time you buy a head of cabbage at the supermarket, do you?" I stood by the lake, the wind blowing against me, carrying the coolness of the water. My mom was right. I had avoided him twice. But given his personality, as long as he thought there was even the slightest chance, he wouldn't give up. Rather than hiding like this forever, it was better to settle it all at once. I settled my mom on a nearby bench and walked along the lake toward him. When I got close, Lu Yance finally looked up. The moment he saw me, he shot to his feet, his knee hitting the edge of the bench with a dull thud. Ignoring the pain, he took a step forward and then stopped, as if afraid that getting too close would make me run away. He looked even more haggard than when I had seen him at the supermarket 5 days ago. Dark circles were prominent under his eyes, and a layer of stubble had sprouted on his chin. He appeared several years older than his actual age. "Binglan." His voice was a little hoarse. "You're willing to come talk to me?" I stood 2 steps away from him, not moving any closer. "Lu Yanzhou, I came here today to make things clear. I've put the past behind me. I don't hate you, and I don't blame Wen Tianyue either. Whatever happened between you two is your own business. It has nothing to do with me. You don't need to waste your time looking for me anymore. Whether I'm doing well or not, whether I'm happy or not, it has nothing to do with you anymore." As he listened to my words, his lips twitched, and the rims of his eyes slowly turned red. I know I don't deserve to say this, but I regret it. I've regretted it since the day you left, Binglan. Back then, I thought what I had with her was just a moment of confusion. I couldn't tell who was really in my heart. It wasn't until I lost you that I realized. Don't. I cut him off. "Lu Yanzhou, you regret it because you lost something you thought was a given at the time. You took my being by your side for granted. You thought no matter how you messed around, I would never leave. But I did leave. You're not sorry for what you did to me, you're sorry you miscalculated." He froze, staring at me. His lips trembled slightly, but no words came out. I continued, "You don't need to apologize. I haven't needed that for a long time. I have a husband who loves me now, a stable life. Every day I wake up, I feel grounded. To me, you're like a course I took in college but forgot long ago. I know I took it, but I can't remember a single thing about it." I took a step back. "So stop looking for me. Live your own life well. I don't wish you any harm, but I don't want any more contact either. After today, if we run into each other, let's just pretend we don't know each other." I turned and walked back. He called out my name, his voice trembling noticeably. Bing Lan, can you just call me one last time? Just say my name. That's all. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The wind from the lake lifted the hem of my coat as I walked toward the bench where my mom was sitting. She watched me come back, a hint of relief in her eyes. She didn't ask anything. She stood up and took my arm. Come on, she said. Let's go home and make dumplings. I glanced back at Lu Yanzhao. He was still standing there, the wind pressing his sweater against his body, outlining a thin, gaunt silhouette. Looking at that silhouette, I felt no ache in my heart, no satisfaction, only a vast, empty calm, like walking past an old house you once lived in. You stand outside for a moment, glance at a window that's both familiar and strange, then turn and walk away. The house is still the same house, but the version of you that lived there has long since moved out. On the way home, my mom suddenly said, "Your dad asked me when you're going back to work. He said he's been keeping some pickles in a jar for you, and he wants you to take some before you leave." I laughed. My dad still makes pickles. He's gotten really good at it, hasn't he? Oh, he's the best now. My mom said cheerfully, all the neighbors come asking for some. If you're willing, bring Xiao Gu back for a couple of days too. Your dad talks about him all the time. My phone buzzed again. I thought it was Gu Huaishu. I glanced down. It was a message from a number I hadn't saved. I didn't read it carefully. I just tapped delete. Sunlight streamed in through the car window, falling across my knees, warm and steady. During the last week of my vacation back home, I went with Gu Huaishu to his hometown, Wuxi. Both of his parents were teachers. They lived on the 6th floor of an old residential building with no elevator. The stairwell was clean, and a few pots of pothos sat in the corners, their vines trailing all the way down the handrails. I followed him up 6 flights, a little out of breath. He held my hand from ahead, turning back to flash me a smile. When we reached the door, he pulled out his keys and unlocked it. At the entrance, a middle-aged woman in an apron poked her head out. The moment she saw me, she broke into a smile. "Bing Lan, you're here. Come in. Come in, it's cold outside." That was Gu Huaishu's mom, Aunt Zhou. She had a soft, gentle voice, and her eyes crinkled when she smiled. Gu Huaishu's dad was in the living room brewing tea, wearing reading glasses and looking over a newspaper. When he heard us, he took off his glasses and stood up to greet me. The atmosphere in Gu Huaishu's home was a lot like my own, quiet, warm, with few words but every one of them heartfelt. Aunt Zhou was busy bustling around the kitchen, so I went in to help her pick vegetables. She protested a little, but when she saw she couldn't stop me, she let me help. We chatted as we snapped the beans. She asked if I was used to life in New York, if my job was tiring. She asked so naturally, like talking about the weather, casual, with no hint of prying. Huaisu was never good with words when he was little, Aunt Zhou said with a laugh and a shake of her head. But he's a solid kid. Once he sets his mind on something, or someone, he never lets go. He told me before that he was dating someone. I asked what she was like, and he only said one thing. She's incredibly strong. My hand paused as I snapped a bean. He said that. He said you've been through some tough times, but you didn't shrink away. He said you kept moving forward, and you did it beautifully. Auntie Zhou glanced at me, her gaze soft and gentle. "Bing Lan, let me tell you something honestly. In this life, who hasn't run into a few wrong people? Meeting them isn't the problem. The key is, after you meet them, what path do you choose? Choosing to move forward, that's the smartest thing you can do." My eyes suddenly felt hot. Gu Huaishu poked his head in from the living room right then. "Mom, what are you saying to Bing Lan? Don't go digging up my embarrassing childhood stories. Who wants to hear your boring stories?" Auntie Zhou laughed and waved him off. Go, go, go. Keep your dad company with chess." Gu Huaishu looked at me. He probably noticed my red-rimmed eyes, but he didn't ask anything. He just smiled at me and pulled his head back into the living room. That night, I slept in the room Gu Huaishu used to live in. On the bookshelf by the bed were his high school textbooks. On the title page was his name written in blue-black ink, the handwriting neat and elegant. I leaned against the headboard and flipped through an old physics book. The pages had already yellowed. Inside was a 1-inch photo of him from high school. He was wearing a white shirt, his hair was short, and his features were bright and clear. He looked much younger than now. Underneath the photo, I found a small line of writing. The pencil marks had been erased, but I could still make it out. Asterisk, be a gentle and steadfast person. Asterisk, I gently tucked the photo back into the book, turned off the light, and lay down. Moonlight streamed in through the half-drawn curtains, painting a thin, silvery path on the floor. In the room next door, Gu Huaishu was talking quietly with his dad. Occasionally, a burst of laughter drifted over. I couldn't hear the words clearly through the wall, but that feeling of stability and certainty came through loud and clear. The next morning, Auntie Zhou made fermented rice dumplings for breakfast. I ate until I was completely satisfied. Gu Huaishu sat next to me, peeling an egg for me. When he was done, he put it in my bowl without saying a word. His dad watched from across the table, pushing up his glasses. Huaishu, you take after me. Clumsy with words, but good with your hands. Auntie Zhou laughed beside him. Take after you. Then, it's fine. Since Binglan doesn't mind, I don't mind, I said, smiling as I bit into the egg. It's okay to be clumsy with words, as long as you're not clumsy with your hands. The whole family burst into laughter. On the day I was leaving, Auntie Zhou packed a big bag for me. It was full of the braised duck and smoked fish she had made. She also stuffed a scarf into my hands, one she had been knitting for half a year. It was made of cream-colored cashmere yarn. The stitches neat and even. Take it with you. New York winters are cold. She patted the back of my hand, her eyes a little red. Gu Huaishu stood nearby, not rushing her. Only after his mom had packed everything did he pick up the suitcase and say, Mom, we're leaving. We'll come back to see you after the new year. As we walked down the stairs, I stopped at the landing. Gu Huaishu turned around. What's wrong? Nothing, I said. I just want to stand here for a moment. He put down the suitcase and came back up to stand beside me. The window on the stairwell was half open. Outside was the gray, misty sky of early winter in Jiangnan. In the distance, cooking smoke rose from the chimneys of old houses, slowly drifting into the clouds. Huaishu. Before, I used to think that life was just one exam after another. You had to get a perfect score on every single one. If you didn't, you were finished, I said. But later, I realized that sometimes, getting a question wrong is actually better, because the wrong questions teach you what the right answer is. Gu Huaishu turned his head to look at me. The smile in his eyes was like a cup of warm tea. I haven't taken many exams, but I think the day I met you, I answered one really big question correctly. I laughed and reached out to punch him. He caught my hand, and our fingers interlaced. We picked up our suitcases and walked down the stairs one step at a time. We pushed open the unit door and stepped out into the gray-white daylight. At the entrance of the alley, there was a shop selling sugar-roasted chestnuts. The fragrance drifted over from half a street away. Gu Huaishu stopped, bought a bag, and pressed it, still hot, into my hands. The chestnut shells cracked open with a pinch, revealing the golden yellow flesh. The sweet, sticky taste melted on my tongue, and together with the warmth in my palms, it spread from there all the way into my heart. The day we returned to New York, the plane took off from Pudong Airport right at dusk. Outside the porthole, the clouds were dyed by the setting sun into a patchwork of orange-red, varying from deep to light, like a painter had accidentally knocked over a palette. My mom was waving at me from outside the security checkpoint. My dad stood next to her, his expression serious, but his eyes were red. Auntie Zhou sent a voice message, telling me to let her know when I arrived safely. Before I turned off my phone signal, I took one last look at the contact list, the number that I had blocked countless times, only for it to keep changing and texting me anyway, sat quietly in the list. I hadn't saved a name for it. I clicked on it and skimmed the last unread message. Dinglan. I wish you happiness. I didn't reply. I hit delete. The plane leveled out. Gu Huaishu twisted open a bottle of water and handed it to me. Get some sleep. You'll have to deal with jet lag when we land. I shook my head, leaning back in my seat to gaze out the window. The clouds gradually darkened, turning into a deep blue velvet blanket. occasionally flickering with fragments of starlight. I was thinking about that moment in the supermarket when I sidestepped to avoid him. The movement was so light, so subtle, that the store's surveillance cameras probably wouldn't have caught it. But it made me realize more clearly than the moment 5 years ago when I took off my ring, picked up my suitcase, and walked away, that I had truly moved on. True departure is never about slamming the door and leaving. It's when you see that person who once made you miserable, and your heart no longer stirs. It's when you can politely nod at him, then push your shopping cart to continue getting what you need, go home to cook the meal you ought to cook, and love the person you ought to love. 5 years ago, I thought I had lost completely. I thought I had lost to someone who understood him better than I did. Lost to 2 years of secret dealings. Lost to those late-night messages I never saw. 5 years later, I finally understood that the so-called winning and losing had nothing to do with me from start to finish. I was just someone passing by, getting off at the wrong stop. Only later did I realize that the train I was on was heading in the wrong direction all along. I got off, switched to another train, and rode it to the place I truly wanted to go. Gu Huaishu's shoulder leaned over, and I shifted slightly, resting my head on his shoulder. His breathing was steady and even, carrying a kind of reassuring white noise. I closed my eyes, feeling the plane jolt slightly in an air current, then steadily continue forward. I don't know how long passed before I heard the captain's voice over the intercom, saying the plane had entered its cruising phase and was expected to arrive at Kennedy Airport in 10 hours. What would New York be like in 10 hours? Probably the Hudson River shimmering with scattered reflections of lights in the early morning, and the coffee shop downstairs from our apartment already glowing with warm yellow light. Zhao Kai was boarded with a neighbor. I wondered if she missed us. There should still be half a carton of milk and a box of eggs left in the fridge from before we left, enough to throw together a breakfast when we got back. In his sleep, Gu Huaishu moved his arm, tightening it unconsciously, pulling my shoulder closer to him. At 30,000 feet, I fell asleep leaning against my lover's shoulder. In my dream, there was everything and nothing, just a vast, bright, open field. The wind blew from afar, carrying the scent of grass and earth. I walked alone on it, my steps light, each step feeling solid and grounded. This time, I didn't look back.